Welcome to This Explainer. When we think about the founding of the United States, we usually just conjure up a few familiar images. But the reality? It is way more cinematic, dramatic, and honestly, a lot more complex than the basic textbook summaries we're all used to. So today, we're diving right in and peeling back the layers of history to uncover the untold story of the American Revolution.
Let's start with a massive question. Was the revolution actually just about taxes and tea? It is so incredibly easy to reduce this massive, chaotic historical shift to a few catchy slogans and, a harbor full of ruined tea. But to truly understand the birth of a nation, we absolutely have to challenge those simplified myths. We need to tease out the far more complex reality of the era. This wasn't some overnight rebellion, right? It was a slow, agonizing fracture between a giant empire and its people.
Section 1. Beyond Taxes and Tea. Before any muskets fired or battle lines were drawn, I want you to picture the authentic, bustling life in the 13 colonies. Imagine the cobblestone streets echoing with horse hooves, massive wooden ships creaking in the harbors, and a society that is just rapidly expanding. And that growth, it set the stage for a totally inevitable collision between two very different worldviews. Okay, so on one side, following years of exhausting war, the British Empire desperately needed to fund colonial defense and manage a staggering war debt. From their perspective, taxing the colonies was just a perfectly logical administrative step. But on the other side, you've got the colonists, and they weren't just angry about losing money. They were furious over the core principle of being taxed without a literal voice, without any representation in Parliament. It was a fundamental clash, and neither side was going to back down.
Section 2. Resistance turns to rebellion.
So, those polite parchment petitions, they were about to give way to sheer defiance. Political frustration rapidly and violently escalated into historic clashes on the streets. It's like a giant domino effect. It starts in 1765 with the Stamp Act, followed closely by the Townshend Acts, policies that just ignited fierce public outrage. And that outrage boils over into absolute tragedy with the bloody Boston Massacre in 1770. The defiance then peaks with the destruction of property during the 1773 Boston Tea Party. Finally, realizing they desperately needed a unified front, colonial leaders organized the First Continental Congress in 1774. Every single one of these rapid steps was a heavier strike against the anvil of British rule, literally forging a unified colonial identity out of shared anger.
Section 3. The Point of No Return. The tension that had been building for years finally snaps. Angry protests in brick town halls shifted violently to the very real smoke, dust, and musket fire of Lexington and Concord. The theoretical debate? Completely over. With the actual outbreak of armed conflict, the colonies justified this massive leap into warfare by drafting a foundational text. The Declaration of Independence was the formal 1776 document explicitly asserting the colony's inherent right to self-governance, officially breaking all political ties with Great Britain. And we really need to remember, by signing this parchment, these leaders were committing outright treason against the crown. If they failed, they would hang, period. They were crossing a threshold where there was absolutely no turning back.
Section 4. The Tides of War. Now, with independence declared, the terrifying reality of fighting the world's most powerful military really set in. Enter George Washington. He takes command of a ragtag, wildly under-equipped Continental Army facing nearly insurmountable odds. To understand the true cost of this war, just imagine the freezing fog rolling through the military camps during the brutal winter at Valley Forge. The Continental Army faced staggering, brutal realities, freezing temperatures, an agonizing lack of essential supplies and food, and the terrifying spread of disease. Yet, amidst all this immense suffering, they underwent grueling military training. The sheer resilience required just to survive this winter transformed them from a disorganized militia into a hardened professional army. Zooming out a bit, the conflict exploded into grueling campaigns across the entire continent. Chronologically, we move from those initial chaotic skirmishes at Lexington and Concord in 1775 to a massive turning point, the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. That was followed immediately by the crucible of that Valley Forge winter we just talked about. And all of these sacrifices, they lead us straight to the decisive moment in 1781, the Siege of Yorktown, where the combination of American forces and critical timing finally cornered the British Army.
This seemingly impossible victory was actually achieved through three crucial building steps. Step 1, surviving the crucible of Valley Forge, which completely hardened the Army's resolve. Step 2, securing vital French military support. You see, the victory at the Battle of Saratoga proved to the world that the Americans could actually hold their own in a fight, which directly convinced the French to provide essential naval and ground support. This was the critical pivot point, an absolute game changer. Which leads us to step 3. Utilizing that French support to successfully trap the British forces at the Siege of Yorktown, effectively breaking the back of the British war effort.
Section 5. A Global Democratic Legacy.
The smoke clears, the dust of battle settles, and we arrive at the diplomatic conclusion. In 1783, the impossible actually happened. The Treaty of Paris was signed. This document officially ended the Revolutionary War and achieved what was once thought completely unthinkable. It forced the mighty British Empire to formally recognize the complete independence and sovereignty of the United States. This wasn't just the end of a war, guys. It was the dawn of an entirely new political era.
And the impact of these events echoed far, far beyond the borders of North America. The American Revolution didn't just transform the newly formed United States. It acted like a spark that ignited democratic movements across the globe. It provided tangible, physical proof to the rest of the world that a government could actually be instituted by the governed, not just dictated from the top down by a monarch.
This profound ideal is perfectly encapsulated in a famous quote from the era. Listen to this. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, really think about how radical that concept was at the time and the pure terror it must have struck in the hearts of global monarchs. This single sentence completely upended centuries of rigid monarchical rule and offered a brand new blueprint for human freedom and civic responsibility. So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder as we wrap up. How do these 18th century events, the very ideals forged in the freezing camps of Valley Forge and debated in the brick halls of Philadelphia, continue to shape and inspire global democratic movements today? It's a huge question, and one that history is still actively answering. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the true story of the revolution. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.